Today's reading is from the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, verses 1 to 7. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given. And the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace, there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Heavenly Father, thank you again for this great opportunity to gather, to worship, to sing, to experience the fullness of your presence in community when so much of the world is fragmented and disconnected and broken apart. We have hope. So God, remove anything that could keep us from experiencing and knowing you and growing more fully into your likeness and your image right now, whatever it is, whatever barriers or things we're holding on to that hold us back. And then give us all the fuel, all the courage, all the energy, your Spirit at work in us to move us and propel us forward more deeply into your grace and all you have for us. In Jesus' name, amen. So, on a room like this on a Sunday morning, we have people who have grown up all over this great planet of ours, different corners of the world. And I'm going to let you in on some of the worship rituals that come with growing up in the Canadian prairies. What it is, especially in wintertime, to grow up in this place this time of year. Once the snow hits the ground and once it gets packed down a little bit, all these great ceremonies, the sacred rites begin. We have street hockey games. We use devices of all kinds to slide down hillsides at reckless speeds, but smashing faces on snow and rocks and whatever else gets in the way. And we build snow forts, and there's snowball fights, and there's snowmen, and all kinds of these great winter activities that if you've grown up in this part of the world, you know what it's like. Every kid raised here, you know that you get up and you put on battle armor, the heavy pants and the parkas and the mitts and the toques and the heavy boots, and then you make your way outside. And at first, it's like the cold air. It kind of is like a punch in the chest when you breathe it in. And at first, it just wants to push you back into the house where it's warm and cozy. But eventually, you give yourself over to the experience. You open yourself up to all that winter has for you. And you frolic and play, and you lose sense of time. But of course, then in this part of the world, this time of year, it gets dark ridiculously early. The sun will set at 4:31 today. And the cold air will begin to pierce soggy jackets and soggy mitts and soggy boots and soggy toques. And so you persevere through the cold and the darkness for as long as you can, but finally you move back inside. And once your toes and your ears and your fingers are about to fall off, then you know it's time to go back inside and warm up again. And the temptation there, here's a critical turning point. The temptation is to peel off layers as quickly as you can and get in and warm up. But if you miss a critical step, you will suffer greatly for it. At this point, you must get wet boots and wet mitts and gloves over to warm, dry air to dry them out. Because if you don't, you could lose a whole day of activity the next day. There's nothing worse as a kid in the winter in the Canadian prairies trying to put your hands and your feet into cold, wet mitts and boots. And so you know that if you don't get them dried off in the right way, the right time, you pay the price. You'll suffer for it. There's nothing worse than trying to persevere through cold mitts. It's worse than fingernails on a chalkboard. And now, that's Canadian winter. The passage we just heard, this happens over 700 years before the life of Jesus. And there are things going on, like the cycle of Canadian seasons, the winter that keeps coming and going. There's a cycle of events that is happening here repeatedly, over and over, and they can't escape them. It's predictable as the seasons in the calendar. You heard a bunch of regions, a bunch of names mentioned, the areas in Israel: Zebulun, Naphtali, Galilee, Midian. And at that point, these were places up in the northern part of Israel's territory. And Israel was on this critical trade route. And all of these empires around them would surround them. And they wanted that piece of land because if they knew if they controlled Israel, they controlled all the trade that was channeled through there back and forth. They controlled the territory enemies would have to travel back and forth along. And at this point, 700 or so years before Jesus, it's the Assyrians, the most dominant empire the world has seen at this point. And they would roll in wherever they wanted with massive armies, all this powerful weaponry, cavalry, horses, and men. And they would blow past anyone in their way. And this was not a neighborhood kids' snowball fight. This was bloody battle. Armies would meet in these valleys. And the legends were that the battles were so bloody, so violent, so disastrous. They said that the soldiers would be wading in the blood that flowed. Their boots would get soaked right through. And then as the battle ended, they'd say that the soldiers would weave in and around the dead bodies to plunder, to take weapons, jewels, rings. And you heard it mentioned in the passage, but you barely notice, the most plundered item on battlefields were boots. Not all soldiers had even sandals. Many fought barefoot. But the cavalry would wear these specially made boots. And so the soldiers, the survivors, would move in and among the dead and take the boots. And they would bring them home. They would clean them up and dry them off. Because they knew one more battle was coming. The cycle would repeat again. Another empire would come down. The women would scrub down the soldiers' tunics, the garments soiled in blood, clean them up, dry them off, get them ready. Because they knew, as sure as there was blood on those clothes from battle, it's coming around again, over and over. Empire after empire, generation after generation, they lived battle boot ready. They'd always be wondering, when will this ever end? Will there ever be relief from this cycle? Each of these areas, one time after another. And I wonder if you know that feeling. I wonder if you know what it's like when one threat after another, it just keeps coming, and it just keeps coming. There's a new variant. And then there's a new family feud. And then there's a new bill you can't pay. There's a new problem you can't solve. There's one more health challenge. One more dispute in a line of disputes. There's one more heartbreaking pain. There's one more soul-crushing, dream-crushing disappointment. One after the other. And you ask, you wonder, will there ever be relief? Will the cycle ever stop? This is the hope that the prophet offers in that passage. There is a day that it will turn over for the very last time. There is a day when it will end. But in the meantime, we live in this. And Isaiah, he has very, very powerful language there that we heard to describe what it's like to keep living in these cycles, kind of in the doom cycle, just hoping for change. And so in verse 2, he talks about those living in the land of deep darkness. And that's a less literal translation of the Hebrew words there. The most literal way you translate that passage is you'd say it like this, that the people are living in the land of death's shadow. The land of the shadow of death. And it is a very powerful metaphor. It's that feeling that no matter how good things might seem in any given moment, right now, there's a shadow of death that's hovering nearby, looming, reminding you, taunting you, haunting you. And so for Israel, for them, they knew that no matter what battle had just ended, another bully would be just around the corner. They would be coming. Come along soon enough. There's a never-ending stream. It'd be the Babylonians, and then the Assyrians, and then the Persians, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans, one after the other. And so it meant that one generation after another generation, they just lived battle boot ready. Women would kiss their sons and their husbands goodbye. Then many would raise their children as widows. Men would plant crops, not knowing if they would be around to harvest them. They would go around and build the city walls bigger and stronger, but never big enough, never strong enough, because a bigger, stronger army would come along and tear it all down. They couldn't keep it away. That is life in the land of death's shadow. You lived battle boot ready, with it haunting you and taunting you. And you wonder, will relief ever come? Will the cycle ever end? Will we ever be rescued from all this? And I think that we are coming to learn what it is to live under death's shadow. We're knowing that feeling. You live under that constant threat that no matter how much progress you make, no matter how bright things seem in any given moment, destruction could show up. It looms heavy. Here's some literal pictures of what this looks like. These are pictures from Syria's civil war. This is the land. This was part of the Assyrian Empire back then. This is a before the Civil War shot, and the very same place now. Next one. Very same location. And again. And again. There we go. There's the before the war, and then the after. And it just keeps going. It just keeps going. Wherever you turn, you see the effects. Keep scrolling through those. The effects of what it is to live in the land of death's shadow. There's before and there's after. And this is the same land. This has been going on for thousands of years. And you just wonder, will it ever stop? Will it ever stop? And we are learning. We are coming to know what it is, what our hearts feel like to live under death's shadow. That maybe you get a few months of clean living, of sobriety, of progress. And then just one night of temptation can undo all of it. Or you go months without an argument. And then one careless word undoes everything. Or you pour yourself out for your kids or for your parents or for a neighbor, a friend, a loved one, but it seems like it's just never enough, like it's just a black hole and you just cannot fill it. You just can't fill enough care or love or effort or energy into it. And there's neighbors that used to be friends, or there's family members that used to love spending time with, but now there's one more conspiracy theory. There's one more round of restrictions. There's one more fight at work, or there's just one more disagreement over holiday gatherings. Anything can lead to all-out war these days, it seems. Do you remember back in the days when the most severe culture war we lived through was the color of this dress? Remember those innocent days? Remember how naive we were? Don't you miss that? But now it's life in the land of death's shadow. Get your battle boots ready, because it's coming. And frankly, there's still a darker side to this still. I'm sorry to say it gets even worse yet, because even if you could solve all of your problems out there, if you could mend every broken relationship in your life, if you could restore all the environmental threats, if you could master diplomacy for all nations everywhere, all around the earth, there's a problem you cannot escape. There's one more thing. It's that death's shadow lingers in you. Sometimes the truth is you are your own worst enemy. You have to put the battle boots on just to deal with you. And so We have these competing desires that go on within us, that you may want to be a good neighbor, be a good friend, but then you get irritated so much you want to slash their tires as they sleep. You may want to bless your kids, to give them everything their heart desires, and at the same time, if there's one more toy left on the floor, you're going to put it all in the fire and burn it all up. And you may want to be fit and healthy and honor your body, live a good long life. And as soon as you eat one cookie out of that box, you're not stopping until the whole thing is gone. Amen. Brennan Manning, this author, he describes our problems this way. He says, we are angels with incredible capacities for beer. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, he was a prisoner in the Soviet gulags and a victim of the oppressors. But even from there, even in the labor camps, he knew the problem was not just out there. From that position, he says, the line between good and evil passes through every human heart. And in generations past, they didn't always have the theory or the language or the vocabulary to describe, to name the exact precise conditions, what it's like to live with this sense of intense chronic threat, the land of death's shadow. But they had powerful language for it. They did terms like shell shock, battle fatigue. And I think we're coming to learn what it is to live this way. And here's what the experts will tell you. This is what happens to you when you live under this sense of chronic threat coming at you from all sides all the time. They say it's like a burden you cannot carry. It's a weight that you crack under. They say your internal world, it'll begin to fragment. It breaks apart underneath the weight of it all. It's psychologically, spiritually, we just cannot hold it all together. And Isaiah, he describes this in this passage. In verse 4, he said, it's like a yoke that burdens them, or a bar across their shoulders. It's the rod of the oppressor. It's that thing that beats down on you, that breaks you down, pushes you down. It's the weight that it's like it's abusing us spiritually, emotionally, physically, that there may be visible wounds on the outside, but they just point to deeper, real emotional wounds on the inside. And they say that when we live in this kind of unresolved trauma or this woundedness, that people tend to cope, they tend to move in one of two ways. And one is that people end up in a perpetual state of readiness, always alert, like they're always on. The switch is on all the time. And see, after all we've lost, after all the ways life has been bombed out the last couple of years, I imagine you'll see this going on either in yourself or some of the people around you. That always on. Some people, they channel it into housework. Always cleaning, always organizing, always bringing order to something. The cycle just doesn't stop. Some people need to be active working, always doing something, always the hands, the mind, into some kind of activity, something to focus on. Or it's the scrolling or the doom scrolling. One more bleak post, one more doom and gloom video, or it's shopping, or it's talking, never stopping, or it's playing games, working out. You can't stop. And it looks like you might be caught in an unhealthy activity or a healthy activity. But the thing to know is we're not doing the activities for the benefit, the fruit of them in themselves. We keep ourselves busy so we just don't have to face the reality. So we just don't have to look inside. Anything we can do to avoid looking at the wasteland out there or in here. And the other reaction people have, some people, when they live under death's shadow, is they go into full shutdown mode. It's like the switch is always turned off. And so feelings get muted. Experiences get dulled. Thoughts, they get clouded. Decisions are harder to make. It's like you're always tired, but you just can never rest. This is life in death's shadow, always on or always off. It's survival mode. And there, we are afraid to dream. We're afraid to have hope because we're not sure we can bear up under one more disappointment. Viktor Frankl was this Jewish psychiatrist. And in the Second World War, he ended up in the Nazi concentration camps. And after the war, he said, he noticed that it was the people who would give themselves some kind of false hope, maybe a date on the calendar when they expected to be free. And when that hope or that date came and went, those were the people that died next. They were the ones that went first. In the land of death's shadow, if you were going to survive, if you're going to keep it together and not fragment, then you need real hope. You need something, a real promise that you believe will chase away the shadow, a light so bright that darkness will be gone forever. And this is the promise that the prophet offers here. This is exactly the hope that he says Christmas brings. And so he talks about the great light, and he says in verse 2, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. And so historically, this is why we celebrate Christmas this time of year. When the days are longest and darkness, we know that we must point our eyes to the horizon to look for the great light, that the light may be only a bit of a dawn, a sliver of hope on the horizon. But by faith, we know death's shadow will fade. It will move on. And so in verse 6, Isaiah says that all of this hope, it comes into us, it comes into the world through this helpless, vulnerable, newborn baby. And so verse 6, he says, for to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Now, you know how heavy your burdens can feel on your shoulders, the way we sag underneath them. Imagine that weight multiplied by the 8 or so billion people in this world. And somehow, in this little baby, the Son given, who is also a mighty God, there is strength enough to carry every single person's burdens. Our backs break under them, and yet he can carry them all. That his light heals all darkness. The shadow evaporates. For the darkness in you and the darkness beyond you. And so first the darkness within. Isaiah calls the baby that is born, he calls him the Wonderful Counselor. And I believe every single person that if you have unresolved pain, issues, relationship issues, whatever they are, any kind of things going on inside you that you need to disentangle, you should make an appointment with a great therapist, a great counselor. You should make an appointment with a pastor. Talk it out, whatever it is you need. And the point here is, do not stop there. You also need to make your appointment with the Wonderful Counselor. That he will treat you in ways that no paid professional can. 2 weeks ago, my oldest brother, he went to the ER with kidney pain. And after spending a day there, they told him that it was likely kidney stones, and they pumped him full of drugs that was supposed to help with the pain, and they sent him home and told him what to expect, which was a lot more pain. But 2 days later, the pain just wouldn't let up. So he's back in the ER, and then they started doing the CT scans, and then the MRIs, and then they did the ultrasounds. And they poked and probed and looked. And then they found them. 2 shadows. 2 of death's shadows, 1 on each kidney. Golf ball-sized tumors. And there they found them. Now, if they didn't have the tools to peer deep inside him, he would have no hope. The tumors would kill him. But so far, things look promising for him. So far, they can find them. They know how to go after them. They know how to heal them. And for you, for all of your inner darkness, all the shadows inside, you need the Wonderful Counselor. He sees into the darkness in ways that no one else can inside you. See, what hurts do you hold on to? What disappointments do you cling to? What armor do you put over your heart to try and avoid feeling? Try and avoid pain? Try and avoid disappointment. What frustrations have got you frozen, unable to love God, unable to love your neighbor well? What gloom hovers in your heart? You could make some guesses, and you might be right. But you have a wonderful counselor. He sees deep into you. He knows every problem, every darkness, every hurt, everything that ails you, and he knows exactly the cure. It is his light. He knows how to shine into the dark places that death's shadow hides from you. So this counselor will lead you from gloom into glory. And 2 Corinthians explains it this way, where Paul says that we all who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, we are being transformed into his image with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. When you encounter this wonderful counselor, this is the language Jesus uses for the Holy Spirit, and you remove the veil, you stop hiding, and you let him see deep, deep within you, it will transform you. Wherever his presence is, there is freedom. And his light breaks off darkness, that you become more and more and more like him. It says that you receive some of that glory, some of his brightness within you. You become like this bright light that just can't be extinguished. You cannot be dimmed, so that no matter what darkness is going on out there in the world, your light continues to shine. It just comes from within. His glory alive at work, shining through you, increasing glory. But you need to know this does not just happen randomly. If you continue in life always on or always off, if you fail to contemplate his glory, is the language here, you miss out. You have to make the appointment with him. You have to schedule it in your calendar. You have to maybe consider starting your day or ending your day this way, to open the scriptures, to open your heart, to trust that the wonderful counselor begins to speak through those words, through your prayers, in you, that he will speak to you, that his office, it is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, that it costs you nothing because the baby born in Bethlehem has paid the full price of admission for you. You do not need Blue Cross. You don't need Alberta Health to cover the charges. You just need to make the appointment. You just need to show up with him, because nobody can do this for you. Nobody can go on your behalf. You have to show up. You have to let him do the work in you. That will begin to heal the inner darkness. But then there's still the problem of outer darkness. Now, when we look at everything that goes on out there in the world, the land of death's shadow, whether it's overseas or in our own country, our own streets, our own neighborhoods, our own homes, who do we expect should fix things for us? Who do we look to? Who do we call on? See, every election, we hope for better leaders. We hope there'll be a better party or better politicians or better government, better authorities, better politicians that will solve the world's problems. And yet, for some reason, every election cycle, they just keep coming around, just like the seasons on the calendar. There they are again, all the world's darkness right there in front of us, over and over again. Could you imagine a political party that ran on this platform? They would offer free, complete health care that would cure and heal every human problem, every pain, every broken leg. You'd have no more loved ones with cancer or coronavirus. There'd be no more mental health issues. That every person could run and walk, be physically able well into their old age. That every person would have a job that they enjoy doing, that would pay them well, that all wars would stop, and every societal problem, all the racial injustice, all the class problems, all of it, the crime in the streets, all of it would be gone. Every person would have a home and a bed and a family and a purpose in their lives forever. That death's shadow would be gone. Could you imagine a political party running on that platform? No one would ever believe it. No one would believe any of it. But this is the government that Isaiah says is coming. And so he says in verse 7, of the greatness of his government and his peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. And so he said, here's the promise embedded within this from verse 5. He says that the day is coming when every warrior's boot used in battle, every garment, every soldier's tunic rolled in blood, will be destined for burning. It'll just be fuel for the fire, because you won't need to put the boots back on. You won't need to suit up again. You won't need to put that armor over your heart ever again. All burned up once and for all. And this is not a campaign promise that any party is running on. This is a blood-signed covenant with the mighty everlasting God. And so he gives this baby. Jesus grew up in the land of death's shadow, Zebulun, Naphtali, Galilee. That's where he grew up. And from there, he begins to break the burdens of darkness in our lives. And now we know we don't fully have all of this peace yet. It's like the sun is rising in the east, but the shadow, it still lingers across the sky. But we can choose. We can choose to walk in the light now. We can choose to love our enemies. Because the light is dawning, we can choose to not be offended. We can bless people who intend to hurt us. We can forgive the pain that people have caused us, because we're not counting on them to make everything up to us. We're not counting on somebody out there to make everything right again. This is what the Prince of Peace is doing. He's making it so. He's making everything just and right forever. All wrong things will be set right in him. And so you don't have to worry about it. You can lay your weapons down. You can refuse to pick up offense ever again. That instead of living with fear of battle, fear of pain, fear of the burden, you can live with the anticipation that everything is coming. This is what this season, Advent, this is what the month of December trains us in. See, when I was growing up, I was the kid that when the presents, as soon as they were under the trees, I was peeling back corners and lifting flaps and looking underneath. I was searching my parents' closet and opening drawers and trying to find whatever I could. I wanted to know all of the good things that were coming my way. I apologize, Mom. She'll hear this later. But the thing here in Christmas is that the gift has already been given that matters most. The baby born in Bethlehem. And we are told you can live in the joy of it now. The presents are wrapped under the tree with your name on them. All of it is yours. It is coming. It is coming. But do not wait to experience the joy. Do it now. Verse 3 says, you, God, have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest. The harvest has not happened yet. But they're being told, start celebrating now. Begin now, because you know it's coming. And this is the joy. This is that is contagious. When you let this joy, the light of God, his glory shining in you and through you, the world's darkness fades. They see, they get your hope. And so we do not give in to gloom. We walk shining God's light, his glory out into the world. And this is happening. It is happening and will continue. Because you have an option here. You have a choice. You can look at the shadows and live in fear. Or you can look to the light and walk in hope, walk in the joy he offers. That choice, that is yours. But the choice is not yours on whether it happens or not. The light will come. It is not up to you. It is not up to a political party. Your enemies can't stop it. No government can make it happen. But it is coming. And so we're told rejoice. Because the passage, it closes with these words. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. See, the word zeal, you hear this used throughout the scriptures. But my favorite place is from the Song of Solomon, chapter 8, where it describes the zeal of the husband's love for his wife, these newlyweds, and they're anticipating what it will be like to fully come together in marriage. And so it describes the zeal of this husband's love that is so intense, it is so powerful. He says, the grave cannot withhold it. Death can't stop his love. And then he says, his zeal for his bride, it is like a fire that is so big, so powerful, so hot, there are not enough rivers on the earth to put it out. And he says that this love, it is so powerful, so meaningful, it is so cherished and valuable, there is not enough money on the earth to buy it. And so we ask, how do we know? How do we know that the light will make the shadows evaporate? It's in this. It is in God's zeal for his bride, for the church. His zealous love is an all-consuming, all-powerful, the most valuable, unstoppable force in all of creation. But I know that when the nights are long and when the darkness is heavy and there's fear, the temptation is to fret, to worry. And we start to look to the shadows. We worry that the inner darkness will take over. And so how do we know? How do we know that we go from gloom to glory? How do we trust this? And it's just here. It is here. It is in what Christmas offers us. It is in the promise through the baby that has been born. This is the hope of Christmas. It is proven in Christmas. It is proven again on Good Friday when Jesus takes on his back the burden of the oppressors that would break us. And he carries on his back all the sin of all the world through all time. And we're told that for a while on Good Friday, a while on that Friday afternoon, it says, death's shadow covers the whole earth. The sky goes dark. But then sure enough, just as sure as the seasons, Sunday morning comes. And so we have the sureness of the promise on Easter Sunday. Every Sunday after, we remember the sun always rises. There's fresh mercy every morning. The promise will come true. It's there. Light always wins. Whenever light shines, darkness fades. It just is. It just is. Hope has come. And so I'm just going to close with this story. I told this story at a young man's funeral just a couple weeks ago. About this preacher in Philadelphia over 100 years ago, Donald Barnhouse. And his wife died really young. And they had 2 little girls. And this preacher is wrestling with how does he talk to his girls about the death of their mother, the pain they're going through, what it means for their whole lives. And on the way to her funeral that he was going to preach, they were stopped at a traffic light. And a truck pulled up beside them, this big truck. And it stopped beside them, and the size of the truck completely blocked out the sun. And their car got dark under that truck's shadow. And he asked his girls, he said, girls, would you rather be hit by this truck or by its shadow? And one of the girls said, Dad, don't be silly. Of course we'd rather be hit by the shadow. A shadow can't hurt you. And he told those girls that even though their mother had died, it was like she only got hit by death's shadow. And death's shadow cannot hurt you. Because on the cross, it's like Jesus stepped into our place, all of our place. He was hit by the truck, and the shadow only passes over us. That we have hope beyond anything because of the burden he took on his shoulders for us. And so we live by the words of Psalm 23 where it says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, no darkness, because you are with me. This is the promise of Christmas. Emmanuel, God with us.